Renee, we're here today again at the Allard Pearson, beautiful exhibition you have here on music, myth, and men. Huh?
Yeah.
Could you tell me what's behind the exhibition, a little about it?
Well, there are many ideas behind the exhibition. The most important is that we think music was so important in ancient periods, and especially the ancient Greek and Roman periods, that we have divided the exhibition in different themes. Of course, we tell about the different instruments. Nearly all the instruments which were used in ancient periods are to be seen here in the showcases, which means that you can sometimes see the replicas of the instruments, sometimes the original instruments when they are still existing, which is a problem, for example, for the stringed instruments, the lyres. And we show a lot of Greek vases, a lot of ancient objects with representations of these instruments. And then we divide these instruments in three categories. We have the winged instruments, the stringed instruments, and the percussion instruments. And these three types are very important in the Greek and in the Roman periods. And at the end of the exhibition, we have the musicological aspects to explain people things about the different kind of scales existing in the ancient period, the Doric, the Lydic, the Phrygic scales, and of course the enharmonic, the chromatic, the diatonic system, which gives the Greek music a lot of possibilities to make music during different occasions, during different for different instruments, etc.
Now we think of music as being almost part of everything in the ancient days, in the ancient period. In fact, the gods invented music. Could you tell us a little about the origin of music, as the Greeks would say?
Yeah, well, that's right. The gods invented everything, and so they invented also the music. And people took over what the gods invented, of course. And when you see these different instruments, for example, the lyre, which was invented by Hermes, the god Hermes, and when Hermes was just 1 day old, he stepped out of his bed, and he found a tortoise shell on the ground, and he was the one who thought, when I cover this tortoise shell with the skin of a cow and make some extra things on it and make some strings on it, then I can make music on it. So he did, and he was the one who invented the lyre. And when he was 2 days old, so 1 day later, he stole some cows from the flock of Apollo. And Apollo was very angry, and he said, well, we have to go to Zeus, to the main god. He will be punished. And on the way to Zeus, Hermes played on his lyre, and Apollo immediately said, okay, when you give me this lyre, you will not be punished. And after that, it was Apollo who's always represented with the lyre. And well, of course, people took over. The lyre was the most important instrument in the Greek period, more important than the percussion instruments, and even more important than the alloy, than the instruments you could make. The other kind of music, which was made during, for example, the triremes, people going on war, people during these symposia making music, but the stringed instruments were the most important ones.
Now you open the exhibition on the other side with a kind of a tale of Orpheus, who we all think of and associate with music and everything. Could you tell us a little about Orpheus?
Yeah, Orpheus was probably the most important and most well-known musician from the ancient period, and he made music on the lyre again. Well, so beautiful, although that was what we think. We don't know exactly, of course. We don't have a CD from Orpheus, unfortunately. But we think he made a very nice music. And, well, he made so many music. He played his music so beautifully that everyone, not only people, but also animals and even plants and trees and stones, were moved by his music. And well, he had a very tragic story because his wife Eurydice was wounded by a snake, and she went to the underworld. And Orpheus tried to find his wife again, and he went to Hades with his music. And of course, he was very successful, and he got her back from the underworld. And he was nearly out of the underworld when he just turned around to see if she was following him. And at that moment, she disappeared forever. And, well, Orpheus was very sad, of course. And the only thing he could do is playing on his lyre. That was the only thing he did. And he went on with playing on his lyre, and he didn't pay any attention to everyone, and he didn't pay any attention to other women. And finally, these Thracian women, he was Thracian women, became so incredibly angry that they killed him. They cut his head off, and they threw his head in the sea with the lyre. And then the most important part of the story is that his head still was singing and his lyre was still playing, which means that music is always existing, whatever will happen. You can kill people, you can do everything you want, but music always will exist. And that was very important in ancient period, but that still you see in paintings of the 19th century or earlier, paintings of the 20th century, that this story of Orpheus is still a very impressive story and a story which gives inspiration to other artists and other people. And that's the same kind of the idea we have in this exhibition, that the music is very important and music always exists. And you will always hear music. When you are looking into the showcases, you can put some headphones on and you can hear the sound of the instruments which we are telling about in the showcases.
When I noticed as we walked in the beginning that there were these Pan pipes. Now Pan is this creature that we always think of in mythology with goat's legs and always getting, seducing women and running around. Could you tell us a little about the Pan pipes?
Yes, that's a very nice story about the Pan pipes. You know that Pan indeed was seducing women, and one day he walked after one very nice lady, Syrinx called, and he nearly could take her, and at the end this lady Syrinx asked to Zeus, well, please help me because I can't escape from this horrible Pan. And then all of a sudden she changed into some reed which was growing there, and Pan all of a sudden stood in the middle of this reed, and what he did was cutting the reed and moving it near his lips, and then this noise of the pan flute came. That was the invention of the pan flute by Pan, of course. So all these instruments, all these different instruments have their own stories, which all goes together with the stories of the gods, of course, because the gods are inventing the instruments and the people are taking over these instruments.
And music has always been very important to all the people and part of the culture that makes everything sing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It is very, very important during funerals, during sports, during your work, during people in war. always you could hear music in the Greek and in Roman periods. And of course we can't compare it with the music we always hear. When we're going doing shopping in shops, you always hear music. That's different, of course. But on the other hand, music was ever existing and always, and you could always hear it.
A lot of the show, as I noticed, attribution to the certain pieces comes from some of those Roman settlements here in the northern part of, in Northern Europe. Could you tell us a little about the civilization up here as opposed to, let's say, the Roman civilization in Italy?
Yeah, well, there is a difference. Of course, in Rome, in the Mediterranean area, there was more music, there was more things done on the cultural life. And here in the northern settlements, you had, of course, music, and there are instruments found here. But the most important musical life and most important cultural life was still in the capital of the whole area, which is still the same. When you're going to the opera nowadays in Amsterdam, that's different when you're going to the opera in the east of the country or in the north. And well, that was the same in the ancient periods. The most important aspects of musical life in, for example, Odeon in the musical theater was in the Mediterranean area. We don't find here many places where music was made, or where even people playing music, musical schools or something like that. We find instruments, and these instruments were used during their home life, during people playing the musical instruments at home. That's important, and of course when they are connected with the gods, with the ceremonies or the ceremonies belonging to the gods. That's important, but the most important musical life was, of course, in the capital.
Could you tell us a little about where people can come, or where the Allard Pearson Museum is, in case they don't know, and how long the show will run here?
Yeah, well, the show is running until March the 12th. And the Allard Pearson Museum they can find in the center of Amsterdam. It's very easy. You can hear the music even outside. When you're walking to the Allard Pearson Museum, you see it in the center of Amsterdam, a very nice building, which was formerly the building of the Dutch Bank. And some people still remember that period. And since 1976, we are here in this building. And in 3 of the main important rooms, we have this exhibition. And after Amsterdam, the whole show will travel to Nijmegen, where it lasts from the 1st of April until the half of June.
Well, René, thank you very much for talking about the musical instruments. It's a great exhibition. Everyone should come out and try a Greek instrument or a Roman instrument.
Yeah, well, you can try. That's right. When we were making this exhibition, we thought about showing people things about instruments, about the representations on Greek vases and all these objects. People can read things about the history of the instruments, the technical aspects, and they can hear, of course. They can hear with their headphones, and they can make music themselves. When they're going here with a tour, we have some small boxes, and then we can open them, and we can take out some replicas of the instruments, and then people can see how they sounded, because that's always the question, how these instruments sounded. So they can try.
Thanks again.
Okay. Yeah.
Ik ben Vincent Geerling, mijn winkel heet Argea. Dat is eigenlijk het Grieks voor oude spullen. En deze winkel op de eerste verdieping in de Spiegelstraat is een uit de hand gelopen hobby. Want zoals zoveel kom ik al jaren ook in het Allard Pearson Museum en andere musea over de wereld met archeologie. Dat is altijd mijn hartstocht geweest. Maar altijd met de neus tegen het glas gedrukt. Tot ik ontdekte dat deze dingen nog te koop zijn uit oude verzamelingen. Je vraagt je wel eens af, waar halen de musea ze vandaan? Nou, uit winkels zoals de mijne. En op dat moment ben ik 25 jaar geleden begonnen met verzamelen van antiquiteiten. Griekse antiquiteiten met name. En op een bepaald moment heb ik een beslissing genomen om deze winkel te beginnen, zodat meer mensen het plezier kunnen beleven aan het verzamelen van dit soort spullen. Want eenvoudig is het niet om eraan te komen. Eigenlijk is het zo dat ik het hele gebied cover van Griekse, Romeinse, Etruskische en Egyptische oudheden. Grofweg gezegd is dat van rond 5000 voor Christus tot ongeveer 500 na Christus. Zo de Byzantijnse tijd, dan houdt het op. En daarin probeer ik een assortiment te brengen waar een ieder iets kan vinden van zijn gading. Natuurlijk is het duidelijk dat je voor 10.000 gulden aanzienlijk mooier stuk kunt kopen dan voor 500 gulden. Maar dat soort prijzen kun je toch ook nog hele leuke dingen vinden. En een beginnende verzamelaar begint meestal niet met 10.000 gulden uit te geven aan zoiets. Eerst moet je überhaupt leren zien wat is er, wat is nu echt mijn interesse. Het motto van mijn firma is de oudheid binnen handbereik. En dat bedoel ik ook bijna letterlijk. Je mag hier de antiquiteiten ook aanraken en vasthouden, mits voorzichtig. En dat is belangrijk, omdat bij dit soort dingen is dat een heel belangrijk aspect. En dat is iets wat je mist in een museum, want daar mag het absoluut niet. Het andere verschil tussen Archea en bijvoorbeeld het Alla Pierson Museum is dat de dingen hier wel en daar niet te koop zijn. Toegang is hier gratis. Eigenlijk iedereen die geïnteresseerd is in de oudheid en bijvoorbeeld naar het Alla Pierson Museum gaat regelmatig, zou een keertje moeten komen kijken hier. En natuurlijk verwacht ik niet dat je de eerste keer of de tweede of zelfs de derde keer daadwerkelijk wat koopt. Maar ik vind het ontzettend leuk om met geïnteresseerde mensen te praten over de antiquiteiten die er zijn. We kunnen kijken naar de mogelijkheden. En het is gewoon leuk om mensen dingen te laten zien. En een schaaltje uit de 5e eeuw voor Christus eens een keer in handen te hebben. En of daar dan eens uiteindelijk een verkoop uitkomt of niet, dat zien we dan wel weer. Dat is niet zo belangrijk. Dus ik zou niet aarzelen om een keer te komen kijken. U kunt me vinden in de Nieuwe Spiegelstraat nummer 37a, 1 hoog. De trap moet niet een bezwaar zijn. Donderdag, vrijdag en zaterdag tussen 11 en half 6 ben ik altijd geopend.
Hi, this is David Heine, Aspect Art. Today we're in Leiden at the Rijksmuseum van Oudheden. Right now in the museum is a very special show called Ritual and Splendor. Now all the objects in this show come from one museum in Japan, the MiHo. Now their philosophy of collecting, and it comes from a family and now a religious movement, is to find the most beautiful ancient objects. Just for the value, but for the ritual value. With the curator of the show, Ritual and Splendor. Now this marvelous exhibition that you have here comes from a single museum. Could you tell me a little about that museum?
Yes, that's the MiHo Museum in Shigaraki, not far from Kyoto, 50 kilometers I think is the distance from Kyoto. It's a museum which is especially built for a very famous collection in Japan. It was designed by the famous Chinese-American architect I.M. Pei, and the museum is a miracle. I've never seen a thing like this. The situation in the landscape, which is a protected area, is, well, it's breathtaking. I mean, I would recommend everybody to go there, but what we try to do in our exhibition here is to show in the introductory part of the exhibition something about this museum and to create a bit of the atmosphere you have when you walk through the landscape and when you approach the MiHo Museum itself.
Now, the collection itself is a very special kind of collection. Could you tell us a little about the organization that collects it and what they collect?
The collection was started by Mrs. Mihoko Koyama, who was at the same time, I must say, because she's retired, the president of the Shinji Shumaikai, which is a spiritual organization, a movement, you could say, which respects creation, nature, the natural environment, that sort of things. It's a very idealistic organization, having nowadays 300,000 members all over the world. They have art very much in, how do you call that in your beautiful language?
High esteem.
Yes, high esteem. And they collect together, this wonderful collection, which was once started by Mrs. Koyama, but which is owned by this organization, the Shinji Shumaikai.
These objects that are displayed here, they're more than just beautiful, aren't they? They have some ancient kind of purpose.
Yeah, they are the absolute top in their field. I mean, there are pieces from the classical world, Greece and Rome. There are a few pieces from Egypt. And that's the nucleus of the collection here, the exhibition, pieces from the Near East. And that was a fascinating history of the Near East. There are so many cultures apparent in this area, all represented here in the show. I use the word show, which is not a nice word, of course, but what you see here is gold and silver and beautiful things. It's the absolute top in its sort.
As I look through the show, I see some objects that are so breathtaking that it's hard to imagine that they've been preserved all these centuries and millenniums. Could you describe a few of the special objects that you have here?
The object which is at the same time our logo, which you see on posters and on the cover of our catalogue, is a wonderful Reiten, a drink horn, in the shape of a lynx with a cock in his mouth. And this is in itself one of the latest pieces in the whole show. The first pieces date from 2500 BC. This piece is the 2nd century BC from Persia. But it's so impressively made that we were all impressed when we saw the first photographs of that. So we put that as a logo on the poster. But when you walk through the show, you make fantastic discoveries, things you've never seen before. Maybe in the Metropolitan or even in our own museum, which has wonderful collections, you see pieces which you never forget. But what you see here is the absolute top of archaeological things. I may use the word art from the past, art from the ancient history, ancient past.
Many of these objects seem to have had a kind of ritual use. Do you know what that might be in some cases?
Yeah, this applies to all pieces which we have from antiquity, of course, because art for art's sake was a 19th century invention, wasn't it? Maybe a bit earlier. The pieces we see here, and we also have in our own collections, are on the whole having a function. They were used, in this case in the exhibition, the pieces were used in the context of temple rituals and in the funerary context. They were buried with the dead in their tombs. So they all have a meaning, and they were intentionally made to serve man in several respects.
When I look at the show, I see that there are plaques and there's even an Egyptian figure. What is that for?
As I told you, there are 3 sections in the exhibition, a classical one, Egyptian one, and the Eastern one. The pieces, the MiHo Museum, they made a selection, but we fully agreed because it was a fantastic selection right from the beginning. So they also have chosen the Egyptian pieces they wanted to show in Leiden. And one of the figure pieces is this beautiful, large, almost life-size statue of a man called Nacht. He was a governor in Middle Egypt around 2000 BC. And this statue is one of the best of its kind. There are only 14 or 15 in the world. But this is so well preserved and so impressively made that we are very proud to have it.
On each of these, there are oftentimes designs of one sort or another. Could you describe? I know that there's one that was that seems to be Assyrian two kings or something that I was noticing in one of the vessels. What does that represent?
Of course, there's a lot to tell about the background of the pieces. What you see here, it's very aesthetically shown in our exhibition, but each piece has, of course, a wonderful background in terms of history and archaeology. I think you are thinking of this lovely piece which is right in the center of the exhibition area, the exhibition place, and that's a beaker, a large vase of silver with gold on it, coming from probably the dinner table of the most important Assyrian king, Assurbanipal, who lived in the 7th century BC. This is a stunning piece, not only when we talk about technological things, how it was made, etc., but also the history which is shown on it. It's radiating the history because it's decorated. There are several friezes incised on it, decorated with the story of the subjugation by an Elamite king, one of these other peoples who lived in the Near East in that era. Subjugation to the Assyrian king, and it's all incised, all these details are incised on the sides of this wonderful beaker.
Now, you said that it's divided into a multitude of different areas. What is included in the Greek area?
The Greek area, the oldest piece is dating from the 7th century BC. It's a griffin head, which was an attachment, an attache, as they call it, of a big kettle. And the youngest 2 pieces are from the Roman period. They are, as a matter of fact, they are, like the Romans often did, copies from famous Greek pieces. And they represent the god Apollo, one of the main gods in ancient Greece, and the goddess Ceres.
Now, we oftentimes think of Iran in the 20th century as this place with the Ayatollah and sort of maybe some kind of crazy fanatic, but it was an ancient crossroads of a lot of civilizations, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a crossroad of civilizations. Many, many civilizations came together, especially under the Achaemenid period. That was the time that the first big kings of Persia ruled. They almost reigned over the area which is now the Near East until India, you see. A fascinating, enormous area. And in this large piece of the world, many cultures had flourished. And for the first time, these cultures came together under the kings like Darius and Xerxes, etc. And they integrated motifs and ideas from the various cultures which they conquered in the art which was created under the Achaemenids themselves. And that's very interesting indeed, a sort of international culture, you could say, at that time.
We often think of ourselves as being in the advancing civilization, but as we look at these objects, they're so extraordinary. the workmanship so timeless. What do you think that we find as ritualistic objects in our modern day that would in any way compare to these objects?
Oh, that's a very difficult question, because just the idea of timelessness of this of these objects is so appealing to us. And take, for instance, this beautiful statuette of the squatting lady. That's really the piece I wanted to have on the cover, but it was already used. It's a stunning piece, and it's as if this woman is still sitting on the market in one of these Far Eastern places. And I think things like that you recognize. You could come across today as well.
Hans, could you tell me why should people come out and see this show in Leiden?
This is a very important question. It's once in a lifetime this beautiful show is here, so they should come. They will never see these things back. They will go back straight to the MiHo Museum as soon as the exhibition is over, because Japanese audience want to see, visitors want to see the pieces where they really belong, in the MiHo Museum. So this is your chance. You should come to Leiden now and enjoy the pieces like we conservators and curators are enjoying it so much. I think everybody who is visiting our museum in Leiden should pop in and have a look and enjoy this exhibition. It's once in a lifetime, I repeat it.
Hans, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you very much.
So could you tell us, please, what the museum hours are and when people can come and see this wonderful show?
The museum is located on the most beautiful canal of Leiden, at the Rapenburg number 28. The museum is open from Tuesday to Friday from 10 to 5 o'clock, and in the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, from 12 to 5 o'clock. For this exhibition, the museum has a completely new audio tour, which is in English and in Dutch. And for this exhibition, we have a small supplement of 7 guilders and 50 cents, but then the audio tour, of course, is included.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is David Heine, Aspect Art. Today we're again in that quaint village of Laren, just outside of Amsterdam, at the Singer Museum, where they've mounted another major winter exhibition. This time it's a relatively obscure painter, Adrien Lubers, who lived and worked around Laren. He painted in a kind of geometric, almost cubist style, influenced by Leo Gestel, who was a friend of his, lived also here in Laren. With us today is Anne Blokland, who's going to explain some of the finer points of Lubers' paintings, what his influences were, and why he should and does deserve a second look. Lubers went to New York and was greatly influenced there, some even say by Mondrian. We'll find out from Anne whether that's in fact true. So join us now at the Singer Museum for Adrien Lubers. Anne, could you tell me who was Lubers?
Adrien Lubers was born in Amsterdam from a well-to-do family, and as a youngster he really wanted to be an artist, but his father didn't really approve, so he had a more practical schooling as a technical engineer, but he was very adventurous, so he started traveling at a young age and decided around 1920 that he really wanted to become an artist, and through his friend, the painter Leo Gestel, he went to Bergen, which is an artist village in the north of Holland, and that's where his career as an artist started. But he still really liked to travel, so he went to Dresden in Germany, to Paris, and finally to New York.
Well, some of his paintings actually reflect kind of a technical inclination, don't they? Could you tell us a little about his style, what he did?
Yes, he was really focused on architecture because of his studies, and he also liked strong lines, the perspective, so he always painted the architecture in the landscape, where other artists would portray persons in the landscape. And he developed a style that could range from really thick paint to very smooth surfaces, but was always a little bit a dark palette. So dark colors, lots of gray and dark red. So that's a little bit of his style.
It seemed that New York City had a big influence on Lubers. Did he spend much time there, and what was he doing there?
He first visited New York in 1916 and was overpowered by the architecture and the building of skyscrapers. And he visited New York several times and stayed there in 1926 until 1928, a little bit longer, and did a lot of drawings, graphics there. But he never forgot New York when he was in Europe, so he painted the city from his memory and from his drawings and sketchings. So when he was in Paris, he would paint New York. When he was in Laren, he would paint New York again, always in nice varieties.
As you say, he was a local painter, wasn't he? I mean, when he came back to Holland, he more or less settled in the Laren area.
Yes, he returned to Holland in 1932 and stayed in Laren. It was quite nice that he would pick out a small village like that while he was so impressed by the big city. But his friend Leo Gestel lived here, and Laren had a good reputation as an artist village. So yeah, he was a well-known person here in the village. He owned a big Buick convertible, so he was the Dutch American, they called him. So he was well known in the village.
Now, towards the latter portion of his career, he seemed his palette lightened up. He painted very bright, geometric forms. Was he influenced by Mondrian?
No, he had a great friendship with Mondrian when he was in Paris, and later the critics suggested that it was the influence of Mondrian in these abstract paintings. But actually, the decorative patterns of Lubbers, which were again New York, had nothing to do with Mondrian's vision on art. He had very particular ideas about art, and Lubbers wasn't a man of the theory. He really painted from his feelings. So there's no influence there for me.
Lubbers actually stopped painting altogether for a while, but again, New York City brought him back to his art.
In the beginning of the 1950s, Lubbers was very much occupied with other things, like Art and Industry, a company that was an intermediary between artists and companies. But they didn't really approve of Lubbers' style. He was a director there, so he got fired in 1952. And he hadn't painted for a very long time, and he was kind of depressed because of these problems he had. And then the story goes that one night in Laren, while having a little drink, his daughter put on a record of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And Lubbers got totally inspired and said, that is New York. Rhapsody in Blue is New York. I'm going to paint again. And in just 1 year, a lot of new paintings came about in very strong, bright colors and geometrical forms. And he used the paintings from New York from the 1930s again. And this is the result.
And could you tell me, Laren was always known as an artist colony, more or less, and there was a lot of artists here, including Jan Slouters. Was there any influence by Slouters or the group of Laren artists on Lubbers that is discernible?
Well, actually, around the 1930s and 40s, Laren was well known as an artist village, but more because of the individual artists. So before that time there was a real Laren school, but after that there were more individual painters, so they didn't really influence each other anymore. They just hang out in the local hotel, but not artistically, no.
When I think of Lubbers, I don't think of anything. To be honest with you, I didn't know about him as a painter until you mounted this exhibition. How does he rate as an overall painter, do you think?
Well, of course, the difficulty for Lubbers is his friendship with well-known artists like Mondrian and Gestel, so he's always the less well-known artist. But for several years he has been well known within a small group of art collectors and art dealers, and this presentation is really meant to making more well known with the public at large.